Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, hello everyone. I hope you are doing well. I just remembered I forgot to download some artwork I needed, but we could just do the old things. I have my YouTuber stuff, which doesn't show up so well on the screen, so I actually photoshopped some different art, but next time. So we'll just use these old things. Why not? Eyes up here, gentlemen. No, actually, eyes there. Subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. If you have multiple accounts, hit it on all of them. I truly, truly appreciate it. The channel is growing. I appreciate those of you who are watching on Twitter because that's actually where it is growing. If you go to YouTube and hit subscribe, it does expose normies to libertarian ideas. Because I found it just so funny the other day where someone thought it was his big own. Oh, she gets like 1 view per hour or something like that on YouTube. YouTube is dying. There's hundreds of viewers that watch at when it's live, but it's Twitter. It's mostly Twitter. Oh, where is Bunchy? I'm missing Bunchy and I'm missing the logo. Here we go. Thank you so much, Mike Seebeck. So I do appreciate all of you on Twitter. If you have the time, if you could go subscribe on YouTube, I would really, really appreciate it. Speaking of Twitter, I am Karen Ann Harlos on Twitter. Become quite the, I know this is going to sound so unusual, but quite the controversial figure. Go figure. Ooh la la. You know, That's just life, isn't it? And last but not least, I would really appreciate your support on Patreon, which is patreon.com/ Pink Flame of Liberty. I'll remind you about that at the end, but we also have YouTube memberships. YouTube memberships. That's a new thing. So the difference between the two is sometimes people just don't want to use Patreon. But my high level Patreon supporters, and Sean Dempsey is one of them. So I am promoting his book, even though I'm not a reader on investing stuff. He knows that. I did read his children's books, which I really, really do enjoy. And he did get his requisite number of reviews. That is really important on Amazon. But even so, still get the book if you are into investing, and give him a solid review on Amazon. He'd really appreciate it. From the Free State Project. Again, his name is Sean Dempsey, spelled Sean. I have deceased brother's name was Sean, but it was Shawn, and it's called The Investor's Warp Whistles. So Sean has been a top sponsor of this show for a while. If you are and you have a Liberty product, or even just a Liberty message, you want me to promote something, take advantage of that. So that is available only on Patreon, and there are certain levels on Patreon. But all of the YouTube memberships will get the exclusive videos, which is book discussions, which right now we are doing The Morality of Capitalism. But you also get the advanced releases of my 2 other channels. I just recorded one right before this that I'll need to edit. It is for the Pink Parliamentarian, and we are talking about friendly amendments. So if you would like to see that ahead of time, subscribe to me on Patreon or become a YouTube member. That is enough about that. Let's continue where we left off. As you can see, this is part 3, and thank you so much, Trendlin. This is part 3. We've been discussing this show, this episode, that was on trigonometry. Not talking about like actual math, trigonometry. And Ruben the Imitator had asked, should you watch the first 2 streams on this topic for context? Maybe, maybe not. I've tried to stop at good stopping places, but I'm going to give a little brief summary here. This is a woman who believes she's anti-progress. She believes progress is bad for women, and that there is a conflict between the feminism of care and the feminism of freedom. Now, I don't think the two should or necessarily do have to come into conflict, but I'm finding her points of view very, very interesting. Also, getting into some difficult issues, and the reason why this is difficult discussions is, as libertarians, we are always like, you should be able to do whatever you want. But her main theme is, yes, but there is a cost. And I've been having a growing concern in my own libertarian journey that we don't always count the cost, or we're not always honest about the cost. We act as if we can have it all, and that is not true. Scarce resources should be something that we understand as libertarians. And she starts talking about the flattening out of the differences between the sexes. Is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing? And she, I believe, is going to come to the conclusion that it's a bad thing, but in any event, she says, count the cost. So we're just going to start up where we left off. I was intending upon doing the whole show, but we have had so much to talk about that I might just make this the final episode, and then you guys can go watch the rest of it for yourself. But it's been very, very interesting. I've also done some shorts that I've clipped from the first 2 episodes I've done on this that will give you little tidbits of what she talked about. Okay, let's go.
You know, why shouldn't we just take that a little bit further and just remodel ourselves as we see fit? You know, if you're bought into the cyborg feminist paradigm, you know, trans activism is absolutely in logical continuity with it. And I would go as far as to say that the cyborg feminist argument is more coherent, so, you know, quite a lot more coherent than those gender critical ones, which say we should have the pill and abortion, but we can't have trans activism because we're going to flatten reproductive characteristics of women. But wait, no, not like that. It doesn't make sense.
So, is that the reason, Mary, these cyborg feminists are, in the words you use,
Okay, I keep interrupting for copyright reasons and because I want to talk. I'm not a feminist of any kind. I start to believe this also, bringing in the Libertarian Party a little bit, to certain causes. For instance, it's when it comes to caucuses, I have now become a not caucus person. Why? Because I think you achieve certain objectives and things warp and weave, or you achieve all of your objectives and then you try to find a reason to exist. I am not a feminist because I do not believe in America. Okay, I might be a feminist if I was in some other part of the world, but in America, we are not oppressed. I'm sorry, we're not oppressed. If you think you're oppressed, I don't know what to tell you, but get help. You're not. And so I believe that feminism, at least the type of feminism that I thought was coherent, has achieved its goals, and now it's inventing new outrages that don't really exist in order to perpetuate its own existence. Too many movements just don't know when to go, yay, we won. Let's go find something else to do. So that's why I like single issue caucuses, and I'm going to promote Mike Seebeck's Transparency Caucus, which needs to come back into existence because it turns out that the LNC has set a meeting. Okay, I know they don't like to think that I'm still national secretary, but I am. Was never told. Isn't that sweet? Like, Angela has just turned into such a tyrant. And if that offends you, I really don't give a flying fuck, because that is, in fact, what has happened. There wasn't even a vote on it. There wasn't even discussion. She just told them that it's going to be in Rhode Island. Now, there was a running joke from last term that if we had a LNC meeting in Rhode Island, that Pat Ford would have to dress as a pirate wench, and I think that agreement must still be in force. So someone should go live stream it. But boy, have things changed. Mike, the Transparency Caucus needs to come back. The absolutely ridiculous secrecy, which then leads to just complete authoritarian rule by the chair. That's why this whole... And if they don't stream the meeting, you don't get to hear any of the debate. Decisions are just made, and it's just insane. Of course, you know, for those of you who are collapsitarians, they're going bankrupt, so there's that. I certainly don't want that to happen. But anyway, I'm going to find out where it is in Rhode Island because I need to get my ticket. Sorry, Angela. Okay. So the cyborg feminism. Back to the topic. She's making feminism sound way cool now. I want to be one. If we're cyborg feminists, that sounds kind of badass. I don't know. But basically, what she's getting at is the transhumanist argument. And I used to be really, really pro-transhumanist. And now I'm starting to change my mind on that. I don't know how far I'll change my mind on that, but you know, as I'm maturing in my libertarian views, I am constantly questioning things, and we should always be doing that. Certainly not a fan of saying, laws. We have a law that you can't do this, a law that you can't do that. But I know I want a culture that celebrates humanity and celebrates humanity in its essence. But when you start going down the road of being like transhumanist, I mean, where do you draw the line? There are certainly medical and technological innovations that have enhanced our humanity. So that's where the difficulty comes. And I know some of my viewers will not agree with me on this particular issue, but I think an adult person can do whatever they want with their body. And if they want to put on certain body parts and take off others, that's their libertarian freedom. I don't think they have the libertarian, well, they certainly have the libertarian freedom to try to demand this, but I don't think they have the right to demand that others go along with it if they don't wish to. Again, we are talking about adults here, but she is connecting all of this together, and maybe it is inevitable. But you do have to start to draw realistic lines that biology still exists. But are we getting to the point where we can genetically just edit ourselves? This is a discussion I had with someone a while ago. Will we have like home CRISPR machines where I want to be a biological man today and you just walk in and you edit? Who knows? But things are moving so fast. Things are moving so fast. And she talked about the population, quote unquote, crisis before, as in not having enough people, not having too many people. Okay, I've rambled a bit, but I like to hear what you guys have to say in chat. That's the best part of live streaming, is I get to interact with your comments.
Porn, sex workers work is a mantra that they like to say.
Yep.
They're pro surrogacy.
Yep.
And they're pro-trans,
Yeah.
and it stems right the way back to this idea.
It's all entirely coherent. It would make no sense at all to be for some of those things and against some of the others. It all goes back to the definitive defeat of the feminism of care by the feminism of freedom. You know, if we're allowed to use technology to remodel our bodies as we see fit, then that just goes all. And when we invite the market into ourselves as a side effect of the emancipation that produces, then you just have to follow that all the way down the rabbit hole.
But Mary, then why is it with these feminists, when they see the negative effects of their arguments, for instance, we know that sex work is not good for women. We just know it isn't.
Okay, let's stop a second. I don't think we know that. Sorry, guys, on trigonometry. It might not be good for some women, but I've actually known sex workers, both male and female. And unless you're going to tell me that you know them better or they're just self-hating and they are lying, Mike knows one of them, Domina L., who has spoken at some of our Libertarian Party of Colorado conventions. She's a professional dominatrix. There are women who are empowered by being a sex worker. Can women be exploited in that industry? Of course. Deal with the exploitation. Don't make everybody out to be a victim that doesn't feel like they are. I'm like actually offended by his comment because it removes agency from women. Now, sex work, I mean, I'm an old lady now, so obviously I'm not going to be a sex worker, but though I'm sure there's some kind of fetish for that out there. But even in my youth, like that would not have been something that would have been good for me. But I don't have the right to say it's bad for all women. Like, for instance, motherhood is very good for most women. I'm not going to say it's good for all women. I am childless by choice. I would not have been a good mother. And I think more bad mothers out there should have counted the cost, as she would say. But there is also health considerations in my case, and I'm not going to get into those kind of personal details. But personality wise, I everyone says, well, having the baby will change you. I don't know. I think you need to decide before you bring a life into this world that this is the life you want. I'm very happy with the life that I have now. But for most women, that's not the case. So maybe for most women, sex work is bad. But to say that for all, especially from a man, I'm sorry, I find that really, really offensive and very, very infantilizing of women who do make a conscious choice. The reason right now why there's so much exploitation is because it's illegal. And it's very difficult for women who are being exploited or being trafficked to get the proper assistance or to get away. But you will be putting a lot of power in the hands of sexual entrepreneurs if this was just legal. Now, that doesn't mean every community has to view it as a great profession. You know, there are people in certain communities who might think if you own a liquor store, you're just a horrible sinner. That's fine. But it's not something that the government or this guy's moralizing or her moralizing has any authority over a woman's individual choices. Now, some people will argue, and Wayne's walking like a Clydesdale upstairs. That's why my screen is jumping around. So if you're watching this, Wayne, could you please lay a little like looser on the hooves? People could argue that sex work isn't good for quote unquote society, that it somehow degrades the values of families. Then you discourage it through social approbation. But to make a blanket statement that we know, it is known, as the Dothraki would say, that it is bad for women as a blanket statement, it's unfalsifiable. All it takes is one person to say that it's not. And I know more than one person. But I would accept the statement that it probably is not a good choice for the vast majority of women. And that shrieking you hear is my parrots. Tonight has been quite a rambunctious night.
People will try and dress this up and they'll try and give you, arguments. But no one would want their daughter to participate in the sex industry. That is pretty much obvious. If we look at abortion, again, no one would want their child, or very few people would want their child to have an abortion. And thirdly, as we've seen with the case of Isla Bryson,
Here, I gotta go back to here. I'm stopping again. That's falsifiable right there from my own experience. As most of you know right now, I am now pro-life. I've been pro-life for a long time now. I don't want the government involved, so I'm not calling for laws outlawing abortion. I think, again, it's a social issue. But in my youth, I was very, very liberal. And in my youth, I'm very open about the fact that I had 2 abortions. One was when I was 18, and I was completely encouraged by my parents. My parents were relieved that I did not want to be a parent at 18. Now, looking back, I do think it was very disempowering only because the very real alternatives of adoption and the fact that there were charities and groups and resources out there that would support you through pregnancy, and that there's no shortage of people that want to adopt children. And unfortunately, I'm going to say something that's sad, but it is true. A healthy white baby is going to have no problem being adopted. And as an 18-year-old healthy woman, the chances would be that I would have had a healthy child at that time. And I completely regret both of those right now. But at the time, I didn't. And that's another lie I think pro-lifers tell people. Now, I'm sorry if you're a pro-lifer and you use this argument. I'm going to tell you I'm the exception to it. They say you're going to regret it, and they usually mean like immediately. I can tell you that at the time when I was 18, the only feeling I felt coming out was relief that I wasn't going to be a mother at 18. Now, decades later, I regret it. And I started re-examining the issue because of a religious conversion. Now, I can make pro-life arguments that aren't religious, but I did come to that point of view through Christianity. I make no bones about it, but I don't want the government involved. But to say there are no parents that encourage their daughters to get an abortion, that's even more false than his comment that sex work hurts all women. And to the comment that no parent would want their daughter in the sex industry, that I don't know. I haven't talked to the parents of sex workers that I know. I can imagine that's the case because it's really, really creepy. I'm sorry, if you're a parent to even think about your kid in that way, doing those sorts of things is just creepy. I don't know if that's so much about the morality of sex work rather than our inbred disgust at incestuous thoughts where that almost goes to even envision your child in that situation.
The end game for the transgender ideology is profoundly negative to women, rapists and female prisons. At what point does this break and do people start to wake up? And are we actually seeing that at the moment?
Well, I think people are breaking and people are waking up. But one of the difficulties is, or rather, one of the tensions is social class fundamentally. And by that I mean all women are not the same. I mean, you can talk about something being universally in women's interests, but I'm fundamentally, my feminism is anti-universalist, and by that I mean I think you can talk concretely about women's interests and you can care about women's interests, but the same policy could be pro-women and anti-women depending on the context.
Okay, that's basically what I was saying. So I agree with her there, and a point that she's been tending to make, which I think all of us have kind of noticed, if you're on Twitter at all, when people go, white women, liberal white women, are you okay? Because they seem to be the ones that are promoting policies that are hurting other women. Again, as I've said before, I do not deny the reality of transgendered people. I don't think it's as much, and there's Wayne using the faucet, of course. Next, why don't we just let a herd of wild pigs through upstairs? That would be a great background noise. But I don't think it's the numbers that's going on right now. I do think there is, in fact, a social contagion. But then to advocate that there is no biological difference is hurting other women. And it tends to be the affluent white liberal women that are advocating for policies that hurt other women that aren't of their social class. So it starts to be a more class issue than a gender issue. Let's go back.
The fundamental difficulty we have at the moment is that a lot of these policies are being driven by elite women who simply don't see the downsides because they're less likely to encounter them. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you think about, I forget the names of the Scottish members of Parliament who've been cheerleading for gender self-declaration mm-hmm. recently, but there are lots of them. You know, Penny Mordaunt has been a big flag waver for that in the United Kingdom. And these are women who likely grew up in fairly comfortable bourgeois homes, because those are the people who become politicians. You know, they've been to university, surrounded by
Going
men.
to stop a second to deal with a comment here of Ski2. Ski2 says, I consider myself very sexually, culturally liberal, as do I. But this transgenderism thing seems like a denial of reality, which I don't want to encourage. I believe people have the freedom to create their own realities, but you don't have to accept it. That choice is up to you. I do think there is, and I do not mean this in an insulting way, and everyone should know I don't mean this in an insulting way, because even though lately people who are mad at me because I don't think libertarians should support Trump have now decided that, even though in the past they were just so supportive and so friendly, have now decided to mock me because I am very, very open about struggles that I have had in my life with mental health issues, as I think a lot of us have, with anxiety issues or depression, and the fact that I have autism. Before all these supportive people, you know, two-faced. Let me say this. I might get depressed and anxious, but at least I'm not a two-faced little bitch. I don't have that problem. But anyway, I do think there are people who have, and when I say a mental disorder, I do not mean that in an insulting way. It means it's just different from the average, where they feel they are not in the right body. And I do think there can be genetic mistakes that are made during development that can cause that. I don't experience that at all, but my personality is much more masculine than some women's personalities. So on the transgender thing, I'm going to say something that'd be controversial, and if people want to think it's hateful, they can. Anyone who knows me knows that, like, hate in me is just like oil and water. I find it extremely difficult to hold on to things. Like, I'll say my like little catty comment I did before, and then I feel better and I'm over it. I don't believe in a concept of gender per se. I just think it's your personal expression, and that there's nothing wrong at all with being a very feminine biological man at one spectrum, or a very masculine biological female. I believe in biology. Gender is almost like the atheist version of the soul. Like, they think you have this ephemeral female essence inside of yourself or something like that, that doesn't match your actual biology. Now, are there genetic anomalies that there's fuzziness on the edges? Of course there is. Just like there in libertarian theology, we can say, we do not believe in the initiation of force, and someone will give you, you know, some completely outlandish example and go, yeah, but what if this? We're dealing in things that are the averages, that are the norms. So what most people are referring to as gender a gender identity, I just view that as your personal expression. You know, from the twink to the butch lesbian, fly your freak flag. But I believe in biology, and in the edge cases, most of the time nobody knows. Express yourself how you wish. But when you put biological men that still have the parts that cause them to commit the crime that they're in jail for, you don't put them in prison with women. Now, does there need to be a third prison for certain category of people? Perhaps there does. You know, I can understand the idea that they may be endangered in a male prison, but we need to take everybody's safety and the safety of the norm. When you're dealing with institutions, you have to deal with averages. And Ski2 mentioned preferred pronouns. I did a video, I think it got yanked off of YouTube because, well, YouTube, or maybe it got yanked off of TikTok. You can find it on one of them, and it's over on Rumble. And I need to check my Rumble settings because I'm not sure my videos are auto transferring anymore. I view preferred pronouns like when I was growing up, nicknames. Particularly ones that are like, elf self and dog self and clown self and all those other it's nicknames. It's your nickname. Just get a nickname. It'll make life a whole lot easier. The pronoun that I am going to use to refer to you is what you look like. I don't care what's between your legs. I will call Blair White a she. People can be offended at that or not. That is how pronouns came to be. Is our eyes take a quick look, we make a judgment call, and to get offended by that is silly. And when I'm unclear, I say they. And again, to trigger the other side, they has been used as a singular pronoun forever. Maybe not in the exact same way we are doing it now, but it has been used as a singular pronoun in many use cases in the English language. We might be expanding that, but English is one of those wonderful languages where it morphs and changes a lot. There's no such thing as linguistic determinism. The word gay used to just mean very, very happy. If you listen to old songs, you'll see it used that way all the time, and it doesn't mean that now. Get over it. That's what happens. As someone who's really into words, go check out my new show, Jurassic Dictionary. We're dealing with old words. I'll be taping episode 2 of that tomorrow. And if you are one of my patrons at Pink Flame of Liberty patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty, you do get it ahead of time. Also, I'd like someone to be my first YouTube member. I don't have any YouTube memberships right now. So you'd make me really, really happy if you became a YouTube member. I would really, really appreciate it. Okay, I am keeping these shows at right about an hour, and I don't think I'm going to do a part 4. I'll just stick the link to the rest of this trigonometry show. This lady is really, really interesting. Don't agree with her on everything, but she's very thoughtful. And I like thoughtful discussions, and I like philosophical discussions more than the silly drama that's going on right now in my political party.
Are mostly reasonably well behaved, relative to the way some can behave. They mostly socialize in situations where men are not routinely violent or unpredictable or just outright dangerous. And I think it's possible, if you've just been sheltered in that way, simply not to be able to imagine just how depraved some people can be. It's just that they're just not able to picture it. And therefore, it's a fundamental blind spot that simply refuses, for whatever reason, simply refuses to grasp the fact that really, really, really bad actors exist. And the problem is that pushing for effectively the abolition of sex in law is in the interests of the upper crust women. If you're a knowledge class worker, which is to say you're a barrister or you're a solicitor or an accountant or something, it is not in your class interests for there to be a serious conversation going on which says men and women are different. Because professionally at work, you can see how that could very easily become, are you going to perform less well in your spreadsheet jockeying job?
You're going to end up making the coffees again and stuff.
Right, exactly. Red flag,
Okay, just because there can be downsides, deal with those downsides. I would argue that the fact that men and women are different, let's say you're a lawyer, which, she's calling a barrister, obviously she's from England. There are certain cases that you are going to be better at as a woman, and relate to some people better at as a woman. There's advantages to that. To hold on to this fear that you're just going to be relegated to making coffee and getting butt grabbed, let's deal with that without saying that in those types of contexts, the differences between men and women should be absolutely flattened. I think we can recognize the differences and still have women in industries that were predominantly male dominated. And the funny thing is, I've been working in law for 35 years, and perhaps it's the area of law I work in which tends to attract newer attorneys. So you work in insurance defense, and that's usually an entry point for a lot of newly graduating law students. The offices I have worked at have either been 50-50 or 60-40 in the favor of women.
Start going off in your head when people start talking about how men and women are different. And frankly, if you're a barrister or an accountant, you probably don't see it. I mean, there's no earthly reason why I shouldn't be a better or worse barrister than some guy, apart from the fact that I'd be terrible. But that's my that's my personality, not my sex. No, this is not. That's just I'm basically unemployable in that way. But that's nothing to do with my sex. That's my bad attitude.
Yes, I found
but I mean, you understand the point I'm making.
And also, there's another way these women benefit, because if we are in a situation, as you described, where there are certain things that have become commodified, well, if you want to be a barrister and you want to have a child at 45 and have a Ukrainian...
It's in your interest.
And you've got money to pay for a Ukrainian surrogate, that's fine. I mean, going down a slightly darker path, if you want to, if your husband's using prostitutes, that's fine, What's the problem, right? And in fact, it may be better for your marriage.
So it's not in your class interests if you're a barrister or an accountant to go very far down the rabbit hole of how different men and women are. And it's not a coincidence that the highest rates of support for trans rights are among the most educated women. It's very obviously in those women's interests to believe that the sexes are fundamentally the same, apart from some trivial differences of genital topography. Because that works for you from a professional point of view. But if you're a bin man,
okay. I've never heard the term or phrase genital topography before. That's a good one. I'm going to have to lock that one away. I think this goes more towards the counting the cost issue. Now, we got into another issue where she disagrees with the commodification of persons' bodies. I believe you have every right to commodify your body if you want. So she had, now that doesn't mean rights and morals are not always the same thing. So she was talking, she brought up the Ukrainian women in this one on how older, wealthy, usually white, liberal women in America can afford to pay an impoverished woman in another country to basically be a surrogate womb for them. In one way, that's life, and perhaps that's, you could view it as exploitation, but for the woman who is doing that might, the surrogate might be the way they are earning their living. We all exploit each other in some way, and in fact, nature just does. And the answer to that is to promote a culture of humanitarianism. And the answer to that is accepting the fact that perhaps women will be given a chance in entering the workforce later, and perhaps we should be encouraging that sort of thing rather than, oh, you need to have an equal number of women or the pay rate has to be the same. Maybe we normalize women entering the workforce not when they're 18, 19, 20, 21, but when they're 29, 30 and their child is 4 or 5 years old. If we're trying to encourage what she would call the feminism of care. But I do agree that this perhaps is an unspoken motivation for what we see of some of the advocacies, that there might be some even unrealized like guilt at postponing certain life decisions, that biology is just not kind. If you are over 40 and you want a child, biology, if there's a short story, if you haven't read it, it's kind of like Old Yeller. It traumatized me. I read it as a child, but it's also really good. And if you haven't read it, it's a short story. Go read it. It's called The Cold Equations. Just be prepared to be a little disturbed. Very good short story. Just like The Lottery is a very good short story. But read the cold. It's either The Cold Equations or just Cold Equations. And the fact is, biology is that. If you wait until 40, your fertility rate goes down and your chances of having abnormalities in your child go up. So if you really want to be a mother, let's normalize women entering the workforce maybe later, rather than flattening out the sexes, because there certainly are differences. Because again, no offense to my fundamentalist Christian friends, not only is biology real, evolution is real, and we were evolved as a sexually dimorphic species for a reason. And those differences are going to exist. Maybe someone can look up. I know there's a Wikipedia article on it. It's a great short story. If there happens to be a couple books with that name, this would be the one about a spaceship delivering medical supplies to another planet. It would be that short story if there happens to be more. It disturbed me greatly. Like, I've only read it a couple times and I could still remember a lot of it and put myself empathetically into that situation. I think actually that story disturbed me more than Old Yeller, and I am very traumatized by Old Yeller. Okay, we're almost coming up on the 50-minute mark. Let's keep going. And if someone could look up the author of The Cold Equations, that would be great.
You're married to a bin man, the sex differences are obvious. Nobody's campaigning for 50-50 representation of the sexes in waste collection or working on an oil rig. I mean, for very obvious reasons. Men and women are different. In terms of muscle mass and physiological,
and discuss threshold, which matters for women,
right.
for men.
Yeah. Working in the sewers or waste collect. I mean, you watch those guys go. They move, and it's physically arduous work. I don't think most women would last 10 minutes because we're just not physically as strong. Which is fine. We have other talents, but the point is that once you start taking apart how much sex matters, you can see very quickly that it's a question of class.
Yes.
It's fundamentally infected by
social
social
women have a particular worldview that is shaped by their circumstances, for which they could perfectly be forgiven, by the way, because people act in their own interest, as I understand them. So we are in a situation where, as in many other things, I think we'd agree, there is a certain elite view of how things ought to be that is not in the interest of the majority. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would say that's accurate.
So you are not a tech determinist. We discussed this on the way here. So I said to you, well, if
Okay, let's stop a second. Do you notice how this all goes back to the one show, which I should stick up here somewhere, but I always forget. You can search for on my channel, which is a show, I believe I entitled it The State and Chekhov's Gun. A lot of this would go away in Libertopia, because right now, she's talking about the problems of elite white women that are imposing their political will upon the rest of us. But if there wasn't the problem of political authority, which a book we went through on my patron, patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I think that book, hands down, is the best argument for anarchy, by the way. He comes at it from an entirely different way than I do. So if you're not a patron, you can check that out. It's a difficult book to find now. It's because it's out of print. It's by Michael Humer, who teaches at the University of Colorado in Boulder. So one day I might get to hear him speak. If we didn't have the power of the state, a lot of these issues would sort themselves out. But the problem is the gun is on the table and someone is going to pick it up. And her main complaint is who is picking it up. Well, why don't we eliminate the problem at the source? And if anyone here next time does read the Cold Equations, I would be really, really curious as to your reaction and if you found it as emotionally disturbing as I did.
Technology is, driving all of this. What's the point of writing a book about the feminism against progress? But your point is you're not a determinist and you think culture matters.
I think culture matters. I mean, it's obvious that culture matters because otherwise everywhere in the world would have the same level of economic development and technological advancement, and they don't. And the only obvious explanation for that is, geography matters, obviously. Geography, but also culture.
No, geography shapes culture.
Right.
I'm glad they mentioned that geography matters because geography matters a great deal. So the development of culture started happening thousands of years ago, and there is reasons why different areas of the planet developed at different paces, and geology has an awful lot to do with it. Now, I know there will be the race realists who will make their other arguments that no thank you, take them someplace else. But geography matters a great deal. There is a reason why there was a wellspring in what's called the Fertile Crescent. I mean, matters a lot. Let's continue for the last few minutes and we will wrap this up. It's going to be the last installment. We've only gotten halfway through this. Trigonometry is a great channel. Go and subscribe to them, and if you want to hear the rest of this show, I will stick that link in the show notes when I end up going back upstairs.
What people don't understand about Russia, the reason Russians are the way they are is because it's pretty hard to survive in that kind of environment.
Have you seen Russia?
Yeah, quite.
Exactly.
And so the question inevitably is, what do we do about this?
What do we do about this? Well, the argument, my argument is that it doesn't follow that just because many knowledge class women unthinkingly adopt these positions which are having a number of heavily negative downstream effects, that we just have to. This is precisely my point. I belong to that class. I'm laptop class. I work remotely. I write for a living. I belong to. I'm a class traitor in even making these arguments. But that in itself
you're
is
necessary.
That in itself is testimony to the fact that it's people are not robots. We're not determined. We're not over-determined by our economic circumstances, and it's possible to take different views. And there are other, in growing numbers of other knowledge class women like me who look around and think, no, actually, this isn't good. This is making things worse for everybody. This is profoundly wrong.
I think this is a good stopping point, and I would encourage you we got right about the halfway point to go listen to the rest of it. Maybe later on they do bring in I call it the anarchy solution, but it's actually more of a panarchy. But that's just a version of anarchy. If there wasn't the means to force political will upon people, I think these problems, quote unquote, would sort themselves out. And there might be tiny pockets where what she considers a problem, and I agree with her, is a problem in a lot of ways, where the people who don't think it's a problem will congregate together. Like-minded people find like-minded people, and we might not agree with some of the communities that are formed. But I think that's the next step in human progress. I thank everyone that went through this, and I thank those of you who are much more interested in these philosophical discussions rather than the party drama. We're going to have some of that coming up. It's inevitable, but I've got shows I've saved queued up to have more of these discussions. So if you're eager to go, the rest of this is going to be kind of like blah, 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 blah. But if you want to hear me do a little bit of that, or if you have a question that you want to put in chat of something off topic that maybe I want to address, because there are a few off-topic things I'm going to address before we go. But if this was all you wanted to hear, I wish you all a very, very good night. I wanted to pimp out, funny expression, considering some of the topics we discussed, some of my other channels. Again, my new channel, which is Pink Parliamentarian. It's on YouTube and it's on TikTok, and it's just quick parliamentary tips. Really quick, somewhat simple. Like the first show was on seconds, but I learned something in writing the script for that. The one I did earlier tonight, which you'll recognize I'm wearing the same clothes, different background. I have a green screen. This is an actual hard background. But I do have a super cool, I'm going to show y'all. It just is right here. It pulls right up. But anyway. Oh, didn't get that to shut exactly. And I don't like spiders still living there. So hold on a sec. That needs to go. There we go. Okay. So Pink Parliamentarian. So if you want to start learning just some quick things, what we discussed earlier today that will be going up is friendly amendments. Also, Jurassic Dictionary. I'll be filming episode 2 of that tomorrow. The first show was on the term knocker upper and get your mind out of the gutter. And then there is the show that Mike and I do together called The Cult of RONR, where we dig very deeply, not into simple issues. What else? I think that is about it, but I did want to address, here's a word you don't hear much, how do you pronounce it? Calumny. Calumny, which means an outrageous lie that was told about me. So, unfortunately, our party chair decided to get on Twitter and absolutely lie through her teeth about me, saying that I am saying lock her up. Let me tell you what I actually said. When I had started to figure out what was going on and that the Libertarian Party was being astroturfed to support Trump, which I think is absolutely corrupt. I make no bones about that. Various people, I had been in contact with various people. And some of those people were saying to me, yeah, okay, you see this. How far are you willing to go to correct this problem? And it was suggested to me, would you be cooperative if others were to file an attorney general complaint because they believe that some of the actions that have happened have been illegal? And my answer was not lock her up. My answer was absolutely not. I don't cooperate with police and things like that. Now, if I happen to witness a murder, I would cooperate with the police in that sort of circumstance to bring closure to the family. But in general, I used to be married to a cop. So my statement was exactly the opposite. My statement was, in Ancapistan or Libertopia, we will have civil courts. There is absolutely nothing wrong with enforcing contractual rights that were voluntarily taken upon through civil court because the state has monopolized rights enforcement. But there would be something very similar in Libertopia. And when somebody decides to become chair of the party, they decide to take on certain fiduciary duties, including the duty of loyalty. And if you breach that, the members do have a right to redress. But I am absolutely opposed to anything that even remotely treads into the realm of criminality. It's a victim, I don't know if I would exactly call it a victimless crime, but it's almost a victimless crime, and I certainly would not be involved in it. And here's my challenge to Angela, even though this isn't admissible in a court of law, they are pretty damn accurate. How about this? You find a specifically qualified polygrapher in Colorado, and I do the same in Texas, and we get asked the question, both of us, if I said that statement. And whoever is determined to be the liar pays for both tests, because I did not say that, and you know that, and you are lying. And every Libertarian Party member should be concerned that we have a liar saying something so absolutely disgusting. I did not say that. Do you want to take my challenge? I'll go tomorrow. Give me a name. Okay. Now that I got that out of my system, would never do that. That is a calumny. If she wants to say that I was asserting my privacy rights under the rules to the investigatory, quote unquote, investigatory report produced by Adrian Malagon, I don't think I need to say more about that. No, I don't consent to libel being publicly spread abroad about me. It'd be like, oh, and let me make this clear right off the bat, this isn't true. I'm using this as a reductio exordium. Oh, Angela, you know what? I think you have a taste for having sex with goats. I'm going to write a report about that. Oh, you don't want that released? Oh, there must be something wrong with you. You're not transparent. Of course you wouldn't want that released because it's not true. So, if we could all just stop the lying and deal with the actual issues, and there are actual issues here at play. And the fact is, if you cannot chair a board in which somebody disagrees with you, and you have the supermajority so that you're going to get your way anyway, you do not deserve to be chair because you do not know how to handle disagreement, particularly when you know you're going to win. And to have to say such a filthy lie, shame on you. Seriously. All right, everyone, have a good night, and we'll see what we're going to talk about next. But patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. Good night.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want